if I can cancel this thing.
Yeah, okay. So this is live now,
Okay.
but obviously now nobody knows about this. So, yeah,
It did pop up, at least.
okay. Um, yeah, so I mean, if we're really lucky, people who are following the campaigns page will see a notification. But basically, uh, we've had a technical problem involving Facebook uh, where they, when, when, uh, when the campaign created this live stream a few days ago, we used some of the wrong settings, and Facebook has no way to fix that. So instead, it seems that the scheduled stream is in fact defunct now, and and that's wonderful because now we have to try and see whether or not anybody's actually going to join a newly created on-the-fly stream. Um, on the other hand, this stream is probably going to still be published as a video. So it's still, I guess, worth talking about some things anyway. Although, as you might imagine, when I make static videos, there's several takes involved in order to get a nice, smooth, uh, discussion of some topic. So here on live streaming, there's going to be a lot less smoothness. But so obviously, the big topic at the moment is the virus, and I know that the biggest problem that the county has relative to prior disasters, in particular the two fires that we had, is that in those cases there were external resources available that the county could tap into. Uh, in this case, the county is so far kind of the least hard hit of surrounding communities. So we should probably not, um, rely on outside aid. Though there is still kind of an interesting question there that Los Alamos, of course, is still the home for the center of nuclear weapons research in the country. So you would expect federal aid. Whether or not federal aid will come, I don't know. I'm also not a gambling man, so I don't think that we should hold out hope for the federal government to, ride in on white steed. So, with all that in mind, I've certainly been trying, talking to people and thinking about what it is that we should be doing uh, with a pending pandemic and recession, probably both coming upon the county. So, the immediate concern is certainly the virus. And there are two main things that I think we can do as a community to help ourselves. The first, obviously, is that our medical center is not even remotely big enough to handle the problems that we're going to face. So I've been talking to people, and apparently the county has what they call memoranda of understanding with several local organizations, um, including the high school. So, and that's in a certain sense good. The high school is essentially closed. So there's nothing really stopping the county from going in and using the high school. Um, and, you know, so with the high school, the big thing that we can do is set up cots. Um, but if we set up cots in the high school, we're still going to have the problem that we don't have enough medical practitioners in the county. Plenty of doctors, but not the right kind. Um, so the other thing that I've been kind of pushing for a bit on the side is establishing some sort of training program. Uh, you know, so we obviously can't get registered nurses in the next month. But what we can do is get people who at least have the sophistication to do, monitoring vitals, triage, that sort of stuff. Tell people who actually have medical degrees who needs their attention the most. Um, so I think that this time does call for a volunteer corps among ideally younger people who are less susceptible to the disease, or not less susceptible, but who are less at risk with the disease. Uh, so that's kind of the other thing that I'd certainly like to see on the disease front. And certainly if we can um, get that going, I'd certainly like to get medical training myself, as that is something that I cannot say that I have. Sorry, the other part of this being a live stream is that I figured I would stay hydrated with coconut water. So the other thing that's really in the news at the moment is that there's been a spate of break-ins at local businesses. And, this is another one of these unusual and unfortunate things. So, of course, at the shop, we do have an alarm system. And I think what they said, Subway had an alarm system so that, that sort of expedited the thievery, right? They had to get in and out fast, and that seems to kind of be their MO in general. So, obviously, one sort of point to make about all of this is that we don't live in the Philip K. Dick story or Tom Cruise movie Minority Report, right? There's no pre-crime division. The question, where were the police? I mean, that's a good question, but it's also not exactly kind of the main thing that police are for, right? Police are primarily a reactive force. So, they've caught quite a bit of surveillance footage. They got a picture of the getaway vehicle. All I can really say about a getaway car is that Jordan has eidetic memory for cars, and so he was able to identify what car it is. And I think he said it was a mid-2000s Accord, though you'd want to ask him. But at the very least, we can say the perpetrator is not a customer of ours. Now, it does seem that there's enough evidence that, I'm certainly holding out hope that the police will apprehend whoever did it. I guess I have every expectation that that'll happen. And yeah, certainly, there's also just that element where it couldn't have happened at a worse time. Right when, businesses are already facing hard choices about the shutdowns. As other business owners have pointed out, probably the main practical thing to say about all of this is, even in a safe community like ours, it's still absolutely worth having, an alarm system, surveillance cameras. Surveillance cameras obviously don't stop crime, but again, they definitely help in the apprehension of criminals. So then, I've, like everyone else, I've also been a bit out of touch over the last couple of weeks. It's hard to just sort of go around and socialize. Oh. Okay, yeah. So Jordan says the getaway car was a 2002 to 2006 Honda Accord sedan. So yeah, but I think given the color, Jordan told me that he didn't recognize it as one of our customers' cars. Obviously, if it was a customer, it would be a pretty short investigation. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, I haven't been, I guess, going around socializing as much as I usually like to. So I'm a bit out of touch. I've started hearing some rumors that there might be ways for county to help small business financing over the next couple of months. But I don't really have I don't really have a lot of information on that at the moment, but I certainly hope that there's something the county can do for businesses. I mean, I'll certainly keep tabs on that. Uh, and another business owner brought up a rather interesting point about the break-ins downtown, which is that it is kind of another argument for the mixed-use conversion that I would like to see, and I know a lot of other people would like to see that. As is, downtown is kind of a bit uh, isolated from the rest of town. I mean, there is certainly housing in eastern area, but it's all a bit off downtown. The apartments are also not quite there either. So if we did actually have a substantial number of residences downtown, then certainly it would make it a less appealing target. You know, certainly we did see break-ins at places that are a bit far away from where people live. There was, although actually I guess that's not completely true, right? Because they say that the van that was used to smash through the vehicles was from the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place, but I don't know whether or not they broke in or what. I mean, it's always a problem with talking about current events is that the details are never quite clear enough. Anyway, so that was just a lot of sort of blathering about random things in order to kill time so that at least some people might see that the stream had been reposted, see whether or not there's basically any interest in this live stream. Now, I also know that there's about 15 to 25 seconds of lag between between me saying something and it appearing for others. But I guess I'll be quiet for a bit to see if anybody feels like posting anything in the comments. Since okay, yeah. So Jordan says they broke into the jiu-jitsu place to get keys for the van, and they used the van to do the spree. So yeah, the jiu-jitsu place is where like the sort of strip mall church used to be. That is sort of next to Anderson Pharmacy. So it does kind of open up a question of how essentially how far away someone can be before they will like hear glass breaking or just the sounds of the break. And that's kind of a question that I don't know a lot about, that kind of impacts on whether or not downtown mixed use is actually sort of anti-crime strategy. I'm certainly I don't, I guess, feel very strongly one way or another about that at the moment. Mm. Yeah, so what do you think are the best ways to get a hold of you to talk about current issues now that we can't really get together? So certainly the campaign Facebook page has an email address, which is Sean, SEAN, or Sierra Echo Alpha November, at williamsforlosalamos.org. I mean, I still do like go into town, probably more than I should, because after all, auto repair is considered an essential service, and incidentally, so is real estate. So you may still see me around, and I certainly try and be cognizant of the 6 foot distance, but particularly in terms of things to put on a Facebook video, my email address. So again, that's Sean at williamsforlosalamos.org. Oh, and it is probably worth mentioning that so there's this whole issue of face masks and the coronavirus. Um, and again, like I'm not a virologist. I don't understand these issues, and I know that what people say is that you should only really wear a face mask if you are sick because the viruses are tiny and will just sort of go through stuff. Whereas if you are sick, then you should try and sort of at least keep the water in your breath and coughing confined. So that said, because the shop is staying open and we're simply focusing uh, on just being very diligent about sanitizing things, um, I think it's worth putting out there. Are there people who have masks that they would be interested in selling to the shop? As after all, we have this sort of twin duty to protect our mechanics from um, infected cars, but then the opposite duty of protecting the public from our mechanics. And so I think, particularly since you can't know if you're sick without being tested, and you can only be tested if you have a fever. Uh, Being on the safe side, we should definitely put masks on our employees. So, if you have masks and you want to sell them to the shop, then you should drop by. Um, how often do I think I might do these videos? So, sort of depends on popularity and basically on again whether or not people care. Um, so I'm certainly open to doing weekly live streaming, and I also recognize that this Sunday at 3 may not be the best time. Um, so I've decided to do streaming at the shop because um, I do need to have somebody else here helping me, and this sort of big open space is good for feeling safe at this time. Um, so that carries with it the problem that I can't do the streams while the shop is open. I would just get in Andrew's way too much for that. So, weekends and evenings are the times, and so we sat down and talked a lot about time. Um, my guess was that Sunday at 3 would be a pretty decent time because it's after church and before dinner, and people are trapped indoors anyway. But we'll see whether or not that all pans out. So yeah, for the time being, I'm definitely open to feedback on what would work for people. Um, for the time being, we'll certainly do at least a few rounds of this. Um, just every week, and if it doesn't really catch on, then I'll just go back to making videos and yard signs, and probably just focus more on things like appearing in the papers.
Do you want to mention something about yard signs and where you're going to have them?
Yeah, so as usual, there's going to be the problem that everything is much more complicated on the background of a pandemic, but uh, I am working on getting yard signs made. So, again, ordinarily, the way that you would do yard signs is, you go out knocking on people's doors and talking about, whatever they want to talk about. And then at the end of that, if someone seems enthusiastic, say, hey, do you want a yard sign? That's obviously off the table now. So instead, I think yard signs are going to have to uh, basically just reside at the shop, so that if you want a yard sign, that you can come and get it from the shop. And obviously, as I said, the shop is being very diligent about sterilization, so I'm sure that we can work out something that'll make you feel comfortable about handling a foreign sign. Likewise, I suspect that there's a bit of an issue here with doing Facebook only promotion. May not have been best approach, but this is also a test run of this because, even though, uh, me and my campaign staff are all PhDs, and mine is computer science. My campaign manager is computer science. We don't actually keep up on web trends very much. Like, we're kind of out of touch with kids these days on the web. So, there's already sort of the question about, is Facebook the best streaming platform? The argument in favor is that an awful lot of county residents use Facebook already. Um, but obviously, the drawback is that Facebook doesn't really have an anonymous mode. So people who don't use Facebook, and there's absolutely just great reason not to want to use Facebook. I could never hold that against anybody. So the lack of an anonymous mode is a problem. The premier streaming platform is Twitch, which is what all the gaming streamers use. And actually, I'm not into game streaming either, so I don't know very much about Twitch. I think that YouTube has something. YouTube might also be more amenable to anonymous stuff.
YouTube does have live streaming now. I'm not sure whether or not it allows anonymous commenting. It might, but knowing Google, they probably require you to log in as well.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, if that didn't get caught by the mic, yeah. YouTube does do streaming, but whether or not they allow anonymous commenting is sort of a question where, oh Jesus, see, this is so Facebook. So basically, the chat window on the left had a bunch of stuff appearing in it, and it didn't. Scroll. It wasn't auto scrolling.
Oh.
So I've now just missed several comments. So let me.
Yeah, Christy just asked about asking
for questions, right?
The day before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true, and that's also quite true of sorry. Yeah. So that's also true of the normal videos that I make. As that I'm always certainly open to questions, and I try and sort of be receptive to what people are talking about in what I talk about. So anyway, as I said, this is kind of a test run of streaming. So I am probably going to put something in the papers about the next opportunity for this, and so we'll have to seriously think about which streaming platform to use, for people who may not use Facebook but read about it in the papers.
Yeah. Charlotte Rose did ask a question.
Yeah, right. Now I'm caught up on the comments.
Okay.
See, because I think once you start scrolling, it sort of saves the scroll position at the bottom. Yeah, but yeah, web design's really fallen off a cliff. So yeah, how do I think Los Alamos could handle the economic challenges that may occur due to the coronavirus? So the biggest problem that comes up with, like, what can the county do, is the state's anti-donation clause in the Constitution. That is, the state constitution prohibits, as a general matter, prohibits public subsidy of private enterprise. So there's always these somewhat controversial things that can come up of, state legislature still wants to subsidize private business, and so they get together with their lawyers and ask, well, how could we draft a law that would allow subsidy to happen without getting struck down by the state Supreme Court? So, we already know about some of those. So there was the infamous case of the Local Economic Development Act last year, the land grant to the hotelier. So unfortunately, the point of saying all of that is that what the county can do is a question that first and foremost has to go to the attorney's office. And I always hate to have that be the answer. But in terms of what the government can do, the first question is always what would be legal for the government to do. Now, from less of a governmental perspective, I think one of the biggest things that should be done is that commercial landlords should really be abating rent as long uh, as small businesses are closed. Um, if they don't, then they're going to trade a couple of months, blood from a stone for losing a bunch of tenants. And I do think that the commercial landlords should be thinking long and hard about that issue. But as for what the government can do, I've heard rumors that there might be options, and I'll continue digging into them, but I'm not going to, I'm just not terribly interested in talking about rumors. Um, I do wonder whether or not, well, I guess maybe I should ask John this one. Do you have any idea what the lab's temperature is at this point in all of this?
In terms of what they're going to do for the community?
So, there's obviously, in terms of the question, the economic challenges that may occur due to the virus.
Mm-hmm.
So there's essentially two ways of taking that, right? Either basically, will businesses survive the pandemic? But then also, what does it mean for individuals, for residents? So basically, I think the lab has kind of been going increasingly towards work at home, and I know that that only works for a certain segment of the labs.
Works for a certain segment. I mean, an interesting thing that could be talked about, and you probably, well, I can get closer to the mic so people can hear me. Yeah, so the interesting that might be worth talking about is that the lab has basically paused all summer student activities. And so that, I guess, that does have an impact for the lab in terms of long-term hiring, but it also affects a lot of local summer students, including the ones that we bring in from the outside. But if you think about all the high school students that we share and all the undergraduates that are local, they don't have a summer job anymore. And I know there is some talk about potentially doing a remote work thing for the students, but I believe the lab is still trying to figure out what to do there. But I know that is something on their radar currently.
Yeah, but do you have any idea if the lab is going to go into full shutdown mode, and if it does?
Well, it can never shut down, right? Because it has to protect things like TA-55. So there's always going to be security people on site no matter what. And I think for the most part, they are in a shutdown mode as much as they can be.
Okay. Yeah, so of course I sort of meant with that, something more like going to winter closure style mode, right? The skeleton.
I think we're pretty close to what would be considered a winter closure shutdown mode, because as far as I can tell, we're all working from home. Whoever can work from home. That said, I honestly don't know what the craft employees are doing, especially the ones that have to clock in.
Right.
And whether or not the lab is paying them or not. I have no idea.
Yeah, but if the lab does go to full closure, I mean, there's kind of a serious question of whether or not, whether it's going to be furloughed or paid.
Yeah.
And so there's always the talk of federal stimulus, right? So, but then at the same time, there's a question: what are the big employers of the county going to do with their employees? So I have no idea about the lab. The county government, as far as I understand, has gone to essential services and work from home. I certainly deal with a number of people in the government on a pretty regular basis, and they're all they're all working from home at the moment. Though, of course, it seems like Public Works is still going at it strong. But then, yeah, as for employees um, of smaller businesses, yeah, I kind of don't actually know across the board what's going on. I know that the restaurants have chiefly shifted to takeout delivery. We actually got delivery from Fleur de Lis this afternoon.
In
A
a lot of
person,
ways, Sonic is almost set up for the pandemic.
yeah. Um, so yeah, what this means for uh, residents, I mean, so that's at least a big, a hugely heterogeneous question. I certainly don't hold out amazing hopes for federal stimulus, uh, but I think the question of whether or not, particularly the lower income residents of the county, are going to need a break from the county government, and whether or not they can get a break, is definitely a question that again needs to be explored with the county attorney's office. Um, and yeah, Charlotte Rose also says it also affects people from outside of Los Alamos. I mean, it's an international pandemic, um, and yeah, as far as the lab goes, I know that the lab also hires a lot of employees outside the county, and so as John was bringing up, I I don't know what the lab's policy is going to be, particularly with hourly employees, uh, whether or not there's going to be paid time off for the janitorial staff, the um, certain members of the support staff. I don't know. The lab, of course, is always really cagey about its own operations. So as a result, as usual, it's something that I can only ever know about through rumors from lab employees. Let's see, 3:40 now.
We still got like 20 minutes if you're planning on running for an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the plan. I
Yeah.
think that's what most people think when you say 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if you don't give an end time, it's
right, exactly. So yeah, what other immediate issues are there? I mean, as far as the break-ins go, I know that the police have put out a call for any information. I also know that part of what makes Los Alamos a bit of an easy target for something like this is, the sidewalks roll up at 10 o'clock. So
Yeah.
doing a spate of break-ins at 1:30, I mean, it's a ghost town, which was probably part of why they targeted this county in the first place. Um, so even expanding upon the point about how more mixed use downtown could potentially help with that, an honest to god nightlife could probably help. I mean,
Yeah.
This was a Friday night, right? Anywhere else, and Friday at 1:30 would not be a good time for a break-in. But at the same time, I know this is a rural community. Ultimately, it's a small town. Apart from college towns, you don't think of places that have a small towns with a booming 1:30 scene. Um, yeah, how much, if any, can the county work with the hospital to make sure this town has coverage when we get sick? I'm sorry if I missed this. I had trouble logging on, and you were talking about this issue at that time. Yeah, and I'd like to apologize again for the technical problems that we had early on in this. So I think that there are two main things that, at least that I've come across, that the county can do to help, and both of these are things that we need to be doing now. Uh, the first is that the county does actually have what they call memoranda of understanding with a variety of local entities. I've heard high school and churches. Um, yeah, I'll get to that in a sec. But Yeah, so the county has memorandum of understanding to use high schools and churches in cases of emergency. So in terms of the, where can we basically put beds for triage purposes? High school gym is a really good answer. And I've heard that the county has access to cots. I don't know how many, but we should today be converting the high school gym over into a medical triage center. Um, and the second thing is that as unfortunately we've all been hearing a lot about, the medical center just has a serious problem with um, not having enough providers, enough doctors, and unlike a local emergency where we'd be able to get medical professionals from outside to come in, uh, the medical system nationally is going to be slammed in a month. So we can't rely on outside help. So the best thing I think we can do, though, having said that, I'm always open to suggestions, but the best thing I've come across um, is just training volunteers in triage, monitoring of vitals, uh, and just general sort of, I guess, layperson medical work. But triage being the biggest thing, right? Categorizing patients by who has an immediate need and needs to see a doctor or nurse now, versus those who will need to see a doctor or nurse in the future. So just that sort of ordering of patients can potentially be, at least to some extent, trained, or at the very least, the data collection to allow others to do triaging can be done. So I'd really like to see some training for lay people to be able to meaningfully volunteer, particularly um, people who are uh, people who are younger and at less risk of serious complications from the disease. Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared, and if they're losing their jobs, we may see more break-ins, etc. Yeah, I know, and it really is being slammed from both sides because on the one hand, yeah, there's more desperation, and desperation is probably the biggest reason to break into a small business and steal $100 from the till. Um, but then at the same time, a lot of businesses have already closed down, and then other businesses are running on lower capacity. So yeah, and I know that there's a problem, and I also know that ultimately, particularly with who the comment's coming from, yeah, the problem has a lot to do with just poor social services in the state. Um, I always kind of get the impression that our county tends to perform better on social services than most, but you know that still doesn't sort of really effectively insulate us from the problems of our neighbors either. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, in the short term, I can only offer the pragmatic advice that's already been offered to small businesses, which is, start looking at security systems. Jordan and I set up the security system here at the shop. We'd be happy to relay whatever we know. I think that Cindy Wells at Pet Pangea made a similar offer um, of providing advice. So yeah, how's the supply chain holding up? Um, it hasn't been as bad as you would expect, as Jordan commented. We are still getting car parts, so the shop has been operating fine. And I know that Jordan also posted on Keep It Local, I don't know, a week ago, I guess, that our parts supplier actually was selling toilet paper. So we got a case of 96 rolls, and I know we've handed out some already. And I think as long as our supplies last, we're willing to bail people out of toilet paper situations. Um, the other thing that we really have to celebrate our parts guys about is that they've provided some heavy duty antiseptics to us. So, while I'm actually going to walk out of frame for a sec. So I'll be back. So yeah, while I did buy the most emergency purchase of all, the most expensive antiseptic, but also the funnest antiseptic, namely this bottle of Everclear. Uh, for the time being, we're not exactly dipping into the shop bar just yet to clean things. So our part supplier has been wonderful about providing us with antiseptic to keep our employees and customers safe. Hopefully that'll keep up in the coming months.
So what about general supply chain stuff? Do you know?
So yeah, general supply chain stuff. I mean, I ultimately just have the same window that everybody else does, which is that Smith's runs out of what you would expect pretty much immediately. I mean, I still don't understand the whole toilet paper thing. I've speculated in the past that it's a coincidental uptick in interest in paper mache.
My theory is that toilet paper is such a bulky item that can only ship so much at a time, and so it's maybe the demand overstrips how much they can actually load into a truck because it's so big.
I mean, maybe, but of course, the the trouble is that something like isopropanol or hydrogen peroxide, those are in pretty small, rectangular containers that pack really well, but they're still.
Oh, they're still.
Yeah, I mean, and likewise with the Everclear, right? And this is a good point to make actually, is you should be using 140 proof alcohol if you're going to be using it to sterilize things. Vodka is typically in the 100 proof or 50% or lower territory. So if you rate the liquor section to help keep yourself safe, Everclear is basically the only option. And so, not surprisingly, on that day that I bought the bottle of Everclear, I went to the Smith's liquor section and it was fully stocked except for that was the last bottle of Everclear. So obviously, I mean, this is a really well-educated, intelligent county. So everybody went in knowing that and bought up all the Everclear and left all the vodka. Let's see. Cindy Wells had a good point on Keep It Local, that she uses something like Ring cameras that are easy to set up and can send alerts to smartphones. Right. Yeah, I think we'll get more break-ins due to coronavirus panic, and more businesses should get some sort of camera system set up, because it sounds like Subway is the only place that actually had a functional alarm and so stopped the thieves. You're right. And yeah, so that is one of the big sort of pros and cons of the modern world. Consumer surveillance has never been cheaper. So yeah, business owners should absolutely be investing in security. In terms of the kinds of systemic issues that Charlotte was bringing up, I don't know. See, that's always one of these sort of scoping problems. Is that that's kind of a state problem. The best that we can do is advocate um, for sort of better social equality in the state. Particularly with the surrounding communities. But yeah, so what Jordan's talking about there is that part of surveillance, consumer surveillance never being cheaper, uh, you can definitely get I guess Internet of Things cameras now, just little sort of standalone units that will shoot their video up onto the web, and then you can view them from your smartphone. Uh, that's certainly the cheapest solution. Other solutions basically involve having a bank of hard drives and cameras that are hardwired or Wi-Fi tethered to the hard drives and just record video. Um, but and past that, if you want to set up an alarm system, the key things are, I mean, basically we can run through the inventory, and I'm not sure how well I can rattle this off the top of my head, but you basically get a control box, and then you buy independent modules, and nowadays the modules are all wireless. So you just sort of screw in door sensors, and then you get an alarm monitoring company. We use one called Alarm Grid, uh, and thank God uh, we called up Alarm Grid and sort of gave them all of the serial numbers for our box, and then they managed to actually register all the sensors. Um, and then yeah, if a sensor's tripped, they call Jordan, then they call me, uh, and if we don't answer, they call the cops. And if we do answer, we're probably going to be telling them to call the cops at this point. Um, but at least the response time on that is pretty much instantaneous. I think small county cops can probably get there in 5 minutes. So then you're just kind of down at what can thieves do in 5 minutes. Um, and yeah, as people have pointed out as well, one of the sort of problems with the subways surveillance setup was that they had really high mounted cameras. So the thief was wearing a baseball cap, and as far as anybody's been able to tell, there's no clean shots of their face. So most likely, actually, the getaway car is probably going to be the better piece of evidence, which was captured in other surveillance footage. So yeah, be smart about positioning of surveillance cameras. Make sure to I don't, the best answer, preaching to the choir a bit on a county full of scientists, but the best answer also is to test it out. Sort of try and hide from your own cameras and see how effectively you can do it, and reposition them until it's not so easy to do. Make sure that you can go in with a hat and still identify yourself. Right? Make sure to do all those kinds of things. Yeah, and you can see a bit of the sort of reversal thing here, where John's using my laptop, so he commented as me.
Yeah. Well, I commented as the page,
Yeah,
so I am the page.
that's right. I am the law.
I am the law.
So I know you got anything else, John?
Let me think. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything in particular. I had something before.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right now.
Yeah, well, and thank you for joining. Yeah, and I'm certainly going to be posting this video, uh, to be able to view it for people who weren't here. And you're definitely right about asking for comments um, by email, for example, or questions to talk about. Uh, when I do, I think this is a good idea to keep doing this. So, I'm going to, as I said, write something to the papers, and as part of that, I will say, to email questions if you can't or don't want to attend a stream itself. Um, so then the other thing that we'll, I think, want to look in technically over the next week is mirroring these videos to YouTube. So hopefully Facebook allows download of just the video source, because we certainly haven't been doing stream capture or anything like that.
Yeah, we could definitely, just copy all the videos to YouTube so people can see them simultaneously. I think there might be some way to simulcast if we figured out how to do the real time streaming protocol thing. Because
Oh,
I bet if we could get it such that we had like a demuxer to like send it to Facebook and YouTube at the same time, we could probably hit
mhm.
both platforms or maybe even Twitch. Uh, it's a crazy thought, but it might be possible to do that simultaneously across all three platforms. I don't know.
Yeah. So my guess is that probably the best way to handle this is that is probably just taking questions
Yeah,
through other media, answering them on stream, and then just reposting the stream onto YouTube.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. No, we should be doing that anyways. It's just reposting everything to YouTube, so people who don't want to use Facebook can see your videos.
Right. Yeah. So we'll make sure to uh, get on that this week.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So there's just a few minutes going off the big clock on the other wall there, which
Assuming you're synchronized, you got 1 minute left.
oh,
Or
okay.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
As that was one of the many sort of Jordan things in my life was that he just searched for like really big clocks on, on the web and bought some quite large clocks for the shop, and I'm sure you've all seen them because one of them is in the waiting room. Uh, but luckily, with where I'm positioned here with the bearing press behind me, the clock is on the other wall.
Yeah, according to this, yeah, we've got a minute left, so we're nearly done. If you just want to wrap up.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, mostly thanks to everyone who joined. Hopefully this was useful to have done. Hopefully people watching this in the future will find it interesting, and hopefully we can generate more interest for this sort of stuff in the coming weeks, because certainly uh, there's definitely sort of the just the issue of where are we drinking beer with the technical problems. And I know there's like 30 seconds of delay. So
Are you talking about the cans there?
oh no, sorry. So this I've been drinking sparkling coconut water. Uh, yeah. Um, so yeah, I think it is really still important to be campaigning, even with all that's going on, because we still need to we need to think about both the problems of today and also the problems of tomorrow. Um, yes. um, I know, and I'm expensing it as office supplies. So,
Okay.
so
Got
so
it.
I made sure to write on the receipt what it was for.
Yes, yes.
Uh, in case the IRS is coming to our records, like, oh, yeah,
Why is there Everclear?
yeah, as office supplies.
Yes.
But so yeah, I think it's important to concern ourselves both with the issues of today and the issues of tomorrow. So as much as everything is sort of weird and scary at the moment, we do still need to keep on, keep doing things like this. So yeah, thanks for joining, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Um, and I don't know, try and stay sane all at home. Later.